So we're going to look at another great exemplar of a To Kill a Mockingbird summative essay. Again, looking at the playing off of writing and thinking about the idea of outsiders in the novel. This essay begins with the hook, the quote hook. So notice that they're playing on Dr. Seuss, and they even set up the Dr. Seuss's quote right at the beginning. Dr. Seuss once said, "Why fit in when you were born to stand out?" In the historical fiction novel To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, the tomboyish, pants-wearing female narrative Scout Finch and Dolphus Raymond, a drunkard man who has mixed-race children, are scolded for not conforming to society's expectations of gender and racial codes. Scout and Dolphus Raymond's eccentric personalities contribute to their status as outsiders because girls in the 1930s were looked down upon if they did not mask their childlike wonder behind stockings and pigtails. On the other hand, Mr. Raymond's associating with Negroes, in quotes, and having mixed race children was considered borderline sinful. When one violates the unwritten code of Maycomb, like Scout and Dolphus Raymond have, they are cast aside and become social outsiders unless they change their behavior. So a clear claim or thesis is laid out right in that last sentence of their introduction, and we have some really great imagery and description linking and setting up our information. So now let's take a look at the body paragraphs. In the words of Scout Finch, Mr. Dolphus Raymond was an evil man, but sometimes there is much more to a person than meets the eye. Dolphus Raymond was a drunken man who was brought up by an old rich family, but through the years his descriptors went from respectable and wealthy to sloshed and an end lover, which inevitably landed him the label of social outcast. However, his dazed, liquored up act is in fact just an act. It ain't honest, but it's mighty helpful to folks. Secretly, Mrs. Finch, I'm not much of a drinker, but you could see they could never understand that I live like I do because that's the way I want to live. This is significant because people like Dolphus Raymond who go against the grain have to put up an act to get others to excuse or pardon their actions and choices. Furthermore, Dolphus Raymond increases his outsider status because he is the father to mixed-race children with a black woman, which is stressed in Maycomb to be unacceptable in their society, and children are prohibited from associating with such a man, like Scout is. By Anne Alexandra. I didn't think Atticus would like it if we became friendly with Mr. Raymond, and I knew Aunt Alexandra wouldn't. I had a feeling I shouldn't be here listening to this sinful man who had mixed children and didn't care who knew it, but he was fascinating. The suggestion here is that if any other bottom-class man acted wasted in front of ladies, hung around black people by choice, and had mixed children, it wouldn't be as appalling. But the fact that he came from a wealthy, respected, indigenous Maycomb family lowers his status so much more because he was expected of a family like theirs at the time. Though Dolphus Raymond's social offenses practically shatter the unwritten code of Maycomb, he had a partner in crime, Scout Finch. So I want to go back to one transition word that this writer is using, and that's this word furthermore. Notice how this transition really sets up to elaborate her thinking and how the textual evidence supports her claim. And then again, notice how crafty her transitions are, going from this body paragraph to our next body paragraph, making that connection between characters. So going from talking about Dolphus Raymond to his partner in crime, Scout Finch. So we know now the next body paragraph is going to be elaboration and details about Scout Finch. Jean Louise Finch, the narrator of the book, sports overall and less than shoulder-length haircut, which doesn't exactly make her a young lady that she was expected to be as a girl in this time period. Like Miss DeBeau's remarks to Scout, a lovelier lady than our mother never lived, she said. It was heartbreaking the way Atticus Finch let her children run wild. She can never seem to catch a break in Macomb, where traditionalists roam, and especially not with Mrs. Henry Lafayette DeBose, an old and ailing woman who is constantly reproaching Scout for her unladylike behaviors. And you, what are you doing in those overalls? You should be in a dress and a camisole, young lady. You'll grow up waiting on tables if somebody doesn't change your way. Miss DeBeau's evaluation of Scout's wardrobe contributes to Scout's status as an outsider because Miss DeBeau's is a traditional woman and Macomb is a traditional town. Notice the repetition for emphasis. So since both the town's view and Mrs. DeBeau's view are parallel, Scout is deemed a disreputable individual because she doesn't dress like how girls are supposed to dress during this time. Furthermore, and again, there's that transition word, Scout relinquishes her ladylike qualities by getting into fistfights and squabbles daily, and doesn't care who knows it. In Chapter 9, Scout confronts Cicely Jacobs about an unkind sentiment towards Atticus, about defending a black man in a court of law. You can just take that back, boy. My fists were clenched, and I was ready to let fly. Atticus had promised me he would wear me out if he ever heard me fighting any more. Cecile Jacobs made me forget. He had announced in the schoolyard the day before that Scout Finch's daddy defended blank. When it is honorable to defend her family against wrongdoers, fist fighting is not conducive to meeting others' expectations of her being a respectable young lady. Given the fact that Scout was born to the loveliest lady there ever was by Mrs. DeBeau's and Macomb standards, hints that there is more expected of her than other girls, and her refusal to conform to society plays a part in her status as an outcast, because the bar is set higher for her, making her best attempt at being a lady insufficient anyway. So we're making lots of connections. And again, you'll notice the elaboration and the analysis that follows in the textual evidence. We have a clear map of this student's thinking and how she connects the dots between her claim and the textual evidence to support it. We don't have that summary of textual evidence. The follow and leading out of the quote is not this shows or proves, but we're clearly, through her voice and her writing, being walked through her mind and thinking. And again, wow for vocabulary, yet it doesn't sound awkward. Her word choice is that above 8th grade and really clear, specific, and illustrates her thinking. So let's look at the closing paragraph here. Scout Finch and Delphus Raymond divergent lifestyles contribute to their status as outcasts because of society's misguided assumptions that their content of character is less than a person who conforms. It is clear that in both cases, the objectives for the individuals to meet are set higher than can be attained by either, especially given their perfect predecessors and their inelastic differences from the rest of society. Both Scout and Delphus have chosen different lifestyles than that of a typical Macomb child and adult, but even if they tried to fit in with the rest of the town, their inadequacies would be highlighted instead of their efforts because they cannot and will not achieve perfection. However, this is not an accurate measure of a person's worth. In a 1930s society, settling down and having children was respectable. But just because the children were a different color, it was suddenly sinful. Scout, who defends her family's honor, has stronger integrity than that of Stephanie Crawford, who lies and gossips. But just because Scout wears overalls, she is somehow less than her. These evil assumptions, as Atticus Finch calls them, are what make up Macomb's unwritten code, a code that will inevitably be broken by the very nature of humanity. On the other hand, maybe it isn't so bad that Dolphus, Raymond, and Scout get attention for being different, because no one remembers someone for standing with the crowd. One is remembered for standing out of the crowd. So again, such a memorable quote and lasting imagery presented in their conclusion. They review some of the key points that they made, and really, that idea of standing out of the crowd is this idea and concept that bookends the entire essay. We start with a quote that has similar ideas and vocabulary, and we come back to that again. So things that we're looking for in our writing to really hit those learning targets: to be clear, specific, have a strong voice, use robust vocabulary. Again, look at the textual evidence that clearly supports their claim, and both our writers are guiding their readers through their thinking to make their argument and for us to support their ideas. So another great model and mentor. I look forward to seeing more of your writing and hitting these marks.